The 5 suspects arrested in connection with the torching of the trucks are expected to appear in court tomorrow. Over 20 trucks, as we've reported, have been set alight in Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga in the last 7 days. Despite the arrest, the torching of trucks suggests how intelligence officials have once again been caught napping. Willem Els, who's a senior researcher on terrorism and crimes at the Institute for Security Studies, joins us this afternoon to discuss this further. A very good afternoon to you, Willem, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I suppose this is one of the most concerning components of these truck attacks that we've seen that happened on days consecutively. We've seen this kind of attack for years now, and there were task teams that were put in place to deal with the issue, those seemingly disbanded, if you will. And I'm just wondering, what do we have in place as a form of police intelligence to make sure that we prevent rather than react to the kind of attacks that we've seen over the last few days?
A very good afternoon to you. Yes, as you rightly mentioned, that this burning of the trucks have been with us for at least 5 years. There have been several drives to get behind it, but we see that not many arrests, apart from the recent 5 that have been arrested, are known. If we look back at 2 years now, when we had the uprising, and where you rightly mentioned that it seems that our intelligence services were caught napping, we see now that they had 2 years to redeem themselves, and it seems that one of two things happened now. Either they redeemed themselves by gathering the information and the intelligence, and it was not used by the powers that be to institute your preventative measures, or they did not manage to get any intelligence that was usable in order to prevent what has happened. So in all, I think once again we have been failed by our intelligence fraternity. But we must also just mention that there are hundreds of policemen and women that are out there that are really putting their bodies on the line every day. But it seems that they have been failed by management.
Yeah, no, absolutely failed by management indeed, Willem. I mean, it was acknowledged back in 2019 that we do have a syndicate that is operating amongst us when it comes to the attacks on the trucks that we're seeing. And while we do have the 5 that have been arrested and will be appearing in court, there are people at the top that are pulling the strings, if you will. What would it take for our crime intelligence institutions to get it right, to get the information to prevent anything mushrooming further? Because we've seen it in different parts of the countries, whereas with the 2021 attacks, it was directly linked to Gauteng and big parts of KZN. Now these attacks are mushrooming in different parts of the country.
Yeah, we must just not underestimate the effect of state capture on our intelligence fraternity. They've been severely hampered by it, and I mean that came out in your Mufamadi report and other reports that were published. We must just understand also that the crime intelligence became a playing ball between the political factions, where they started to focus more on spying for the opposition or against the opposition than on actually gathering intelligence for the country. And in that event, they lost a lot of their capacity on the ground in order to gather good intelligence. Now, you don't rebuild intelligence in 1 week or in 1 month. It's a time-consuming effort that needs to be taken, and what you need to do also, you need to start to recruit new informants. You have to build trust between the operators or the handlers and the informers in order to build a very solid sort of network, and that is a challenge. It takes a very long time. And we understand that they are rebuilding, and there might have been some challenges, but what seems to us, what happened in this time around, is that they failed us once again.
Yeah, I mean, this is very worrying indeed, Willem, and one wonders, because organized crime is something that will probably remain with us for as long as we're on this earth, because that's just the nature of societies, not just in South Africa, but in the world. When it comes to the concerns and the fears that have been raised to say this could be a build-up to what we saw back in 2021, do you think that would be a bit of a reach, or it could potentially be what we saw back in 21, the beginnings of, if you will?
You know, we don't know at the moment because since 2021, we haven't seen that the kingpins of that uprising were arrested. So they are still out there, and you know, we see once again now what we understand to be some of the foot soldiers that have been arrested. So what needs to happen now is these cases need to be thoroughly investigated. Information needs to be obtained from these suspects, and they have to go after the kingpins, because if you don't cut off the head of the snake, we're going to sit with this for years to come.
Yeah, and just based on your experience and working in the terrorism and crime space, Willem, have there been any successful prosecutions within the organized crime space here in South Africa when it comes to instances of economic sabotage of this nature?
Unfortunately, so the judiciary has also been targeted by the state capture, and they're also lacking a lot of capacity. But there were some very good results recently. If you can remember, the Israeli syndicate that was arrested in Bryanston, we saw recent weeks, we saw a very good verdict against them. So there is some progress, but they are also severely hampered. And what we need to do in this event, with the judiciary, with our police, and also with our intelligence, you know, it is time that the state take hands with the private sector, because a lot of your expertise have left the police and intelligence fraternities for the private sector. They have got very good networks. They are operating now for private companies, but they've got a lot to offer for the police if they share and cooperate with each other.
One more question for you, Willem, if you'll indulge me. We are expecting to speak with SAP's high-ranking official in the next hour. And as low-hanging fruit, what exactly would you ask them in terms of what are you doing at the moment, or what advice would you give them as low-hanging fruits to perhaps start to deal with the issues on the ground within the different provinces?
Well, you see, the efforts of the police are encouraging. We see that they launched quite a few operations in crime fighting, battling crime, where they have roadblocks where there's a lot of visibility. Once again, taking hands with the private sector should be high on the table. But also, what we need to do is we need to really stand back and go for the top. We have to go for broke here on the one hand, but what also needs to be done, and we see that they have done so in the past to some extent, is they really have to take the public into their confidence. There need to be good communication between them and the public in order to rebuild confidence.
Thank you very much, Willem, for those insights. That is Willem Els, who's the senior researcher on terrorism and crimes at the Institute for Security Studies, answering the question for us: has our crime intelligence failed us when it comes to being proactive rather than reactive when it comes to the recent attacks on trucks that we've seen in different parts of the country? Still